craven, the hunter, who uses all the methods of the animals.
This Thursday.
Once you're on his list, there's only one way off.
Are you like your father?
He puts evil into the world. I get rid of people like him.
Who's next?
Witness the making of a new Marvel villain.
You think you're some kind of honor. You're a criminal, just like our father.
Aaron Taylor Johnson is Kraven the Hunter. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent. In theaters Thursday.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margalus, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday night, December 9th, 2024, as we record this new episode. After Juan Soto signed on Sunday night, things calmed down a bit with the premium free agent signings, but that could always change in a hurry. The Chicago White Sox made their first winter meetings move, but it wasn't trading anyone away. Instead, they signed outfielder Mike Tauchman. We'll discuss that signing later in the show, but Monday was our first chance at Sox Machine to speak with manager Will Venable and general manager Chris Getz in Dallas, as the Chicago White Sox officially named their coaching staff for the 2025 season. One notable was Grady Sizemore's role as offensive coordinator. Manager Will Venable shared what that role requires and the importance on his staff.
To announce our staff today, it was an amazing process, being able to get through it and kind of put all the puzzle pieces together. Very excited to be able to have added Walker and McKeithen, two guys that, as we were going through this process, we just heard a lot of great things about, and as we kind of work through how they fit with the rest of our staff, we're really excited about them. Obviously very excited about the people that we are keeping on board, who we are really confident and excited about and their abilities to continue to help us move forward and push this group. I think part of our excitement is also about Grady. Somebody who has I went through this process and learned about the club, had a good understanding of his impact on not only the coaches but certainly the players, and be able to have him back and leverage his his knowledge of the game, his relationships with people in the clubhouse and the organization. I was extremely excited. I know we saw, we gave him the title offensive coordinator. That's going to be a really cool role for him, where we can have him have an impact over offensive strategy, and really set the tone for some of the things that we want to accomplish situationally, at the plate, on the bases. He's going to help in line of construction. He will have input on our advanced process offensively, our feedback for our players, and our game planning as well. So very excited about all of it, and happy to announce our staff for this year. Yeah, I think that, number one, being a hitting coach and grinding in the cage on moves and game planning and approach, it takes a lot. You have a lot of responsibility, a lot of bodies on a daily basis to communicate with and to be in touch with. And a lot of times I think it's nice to have somebody that can have an overarching perspective and be aware of trends and kind of overarching philosophical stuff that is really important to keep an eye on too. So it's going to be different than what it looked like in Texas, but that role is going to be really important to our staff.
With many coaches coming back from last year's 121-loss season, Chris Getz explained why that's the case.
We got a lot of individuals that remain on the staff that were the first year last year. And so, you always look for ways to improve, whether it be, your player group or your coaching group. You don't want to make changes for the sake of making change. You try to support the coaches the best we can to ultimately serve our players, and we feel really good about our group.
The White Sox brought many members of the front office with them to Dallas and helped aid in decision-making during the winter meetings. Getz sounded excited about that arrangement, even though he isn't setting hard goals for what he wants to accomplish at these winter meetings.
Having everyone together at an event like this where there's a lot of buzz, it's a little bit of a glimpse into the upcoming year, and spring training once we get through the holidays is right around the corner. So obviously we still have a lot of work to do, both organizationally and underneath in a major league club, and we're spending a lot of time together and trying to put our best foot forward. I didn't come in thinking that we needed to do this, we need to do that, because so much of this is whether it be discussions with player agents, with other clubs, everyone has their plans, and sometimes there's just a certain pace to any sort of negotiation, so to speak. So we understand what our needs are. We're going to remain big picture with every move that we make, but to have everyone together to have those discussions is something that I always enjoy, and we'll see if we can get some things done while we're here.
Naturally, conversation with Chris Getz turns to the impending Garrett Crochet trade. Getz shared the latest standing on Crochet possibly being dealt, if he's receiving any serious offers, and what if the strategy in trading Crochet is any different than last year's Dylan Cease trade.
I wouldn't say there's a different strategy. I think it's, you've got every offseason is different. Every deadline is different. The market will dictate so much of this. And, when you're talking about off-season versus in-season, when you're in the off-season, you've got free agency that certainly, garners some attention that may affect a trade market. When you have, a deadline, the only way to access players is through making trades. So I think it brings a different bit of a pace. However, we've had a lot of conversations on a lot of different players, quite honestly. Obviously, Garrett gets a lot of attention just because of the pitcher that he's become, and that's a testament to the player, to the person, the work that he put in. He's got one of the best pitcher makeups that I've been around. I mean, this guy is at just a different level, and that showed last year, and obviously it's other teams have taken notice, and then I think in a way refreshingly Robert's gotten a lot of attention as well, and that just speaks to the talent that Louis Robert brings to the table. I mean, at his floor, just because of the defense and the base running and the power, he could be an above average player, let alone if you get a smooth runway in the beginning of the year, and what he's capable of doing throughout a full season. I mean, he's an impactful guy, and teams are recognizing that. Not to say that we're heavily motivated by any sense, but when you're in a rebuild like this, you got to look at ways to accelerate it. And if there's something out there that we feel like can move this along and take us to another level, we're going to consider it. I mean, it's tough to say you're surprised when you have a pitcher that went out and did what he did. I mean, there's only so many frontline guys, ace caliber type pitchers in our game. So there isn't a team in baseball that wouldn't take Garrett Crochet, and we feel very fortunate to have him wearing a White Sox uniform and comfortable going into the season with Garrett Crochet. We believe in the pitcher. I mean, he's a guy that went out last year and has proven that he's a top pitcher in our game. Some teams that are more sincere than others, and then there's some organizations that just we match up and we align more. We're still kind of learning, and those conversations will be ongoing. But while we're here, we're going to do the best we can for the White Sox, and if that means that we make a move, we make a move. But it's okay if we don't.
Outside of Crochet, the White Sox have other areas that need to be addressed. One spot is what's going on at shortstop.
We're looking at a lot of different options. Obviously, we've got Colson coming up. He had a very nice fall league. Finished strong in Charlotte in August and September and carried that into the AFL. And, we feel pretty good about the track that he's on. Now, if there's someone else out there that can, strengthen our infield positional group, we'll do it. And, that's why we're here, to continue those conversations.
Is Colson on a track that could make him in the mix for that for opening day?
We expect him to compete for a spot in spring training.
The other two positions were asked, starting pitcher and right field, by Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan and myself. Listen to Getz's tone when answering our questions about those two specific positions.
We're looking at some pitching, to bring into the organization. We're looking for opportunities to bring in pitching. We're looking to add to it. We are, and that's something that we may accomplish here. But we plan on going into spring training, adding to that group.
Joining me now on the Recap Podcast after hearing the sound bites from White Sox manager Will Venable and White Sox general manager Chris Getz is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com, Jim Margalus, and the Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan. And as we were setting up in the kitchen in the Dallas, Texas Airbnb and where we are staying, Scott Merkin of MLB.com just broke some news that the White Sox signed former Chicago Cubs outfielder Mike Tauchman to a major league deal, as Tauchman had an on-base percentage of .360 plus. He was known more as a guy getting on base. We just heard Chris Getz answer James's question about right field. So James, let's start there with the breaking news as we were getting set up to record this episode. Does Mike Tauchman fit with what Chris Getz told us today in his media scrum, that he wanted to get another right fielder before spring training? Does Tauchman fit that role?
He can. He can probably also do more. I think he's stretched, especially now that he's 34 in center. But if you're trying to at least posture that you could trade Luis Robert, Slater has already talked about that they have told him he might play center a little bit. Tauchman could probably do a little bit of that too. I don't think they necessarily have a full-time center fielder if they traded Luis Robert tomorrow, but he's someone who, he's, I think the best thing I said is that he's a major leaguer, but he plays at major league quality, which is something that not everyone on this roster can say or has done before. But he can play probably all three positions, at least in the pinch. And immediately, if you look at this roster as it currently composed, he's clearly an upgrade offensively for a strong side of the platoon with Austin Slater in right field over, the two guys he traded for in February with Fletcher and Deloach. Deloach had a hot week at the end of the season, though, so I don't know. Did. Maybe you put that over 2 years of 360 OVP. Dealer's choice.
So, Jim, what does his outfield look like? I know it's early December, there's still time, but if we were rolling into mid-February into spring training, so if they can't find someone for Benintendi or Robert, I assume that's still your left field, center field, even though we've had that argument, or not argument, but a debate about maybe making Benintendi... Argument. That's what we do here. We argue all the time. But that debate about making Benintendi more of a primary DH... and having guys like Austin Slater play more left field because they're better defensively. But you're rolling now in with Benintendi, Robert, Mike Tauchman, as Scott Merkin said, this is an MLB deal. Austin Slater's also a major league deal. So Dominic Fletcher and Zach Deloach, should they be on Zillow still looking for places to rent in Charlotte, or are they still in the mix here?
Or do the White Sox take care of that now when it comes to rentals for very short term? I'm not sure what the rules are, but yeah, I think it's more, protection for a trade. Also injuries, given that Tauchman and Slater can cover center in a pinch. Also, Fletcher can cover center. He's definitely better in rights, but they do have options for those two positions. I think that's kind of the frontline outfield, and it does, if they roll into opening day without making a trade of either Robert or Benintendi, that layer of major leaguers forces Fletcher or Deloach to play their way into a job versus just handing them one and say, I hope it goes better this year. And that's useful, I think, for the purpose of avoiding setting a new record for losses in the season. So, that's the bar we're working with right now, pretty low. But yeah, Tauchman gets on base. He seems like somebody better fit to solve a problem in 2021 or 2022 when they really needed credible corner outfielder who could like play half the season and get on base and set up some RBI opportunities for the big bats. And like, instead of running Adam Eaton out there or Larry Garcia and Adam Engel in like key postseason games or late season games, he's a little bit miscast as somebody with a high floor and a low ceiling for like providing a real impact for this team. But I think for providing a veneer of professionalism and more of a at bat that keeps the line moving, I think he's somebody who can lead by example rather than somebody who is, cross your fingers like Fletcher, like that the power shows up, or with Deloche that he, rediscovers the 23 homer power that he had with Tacoma that didn't translate to either Chicago or Charlotte.
Just in case if our friend over at MLB Radio, Mike Farron, is listening to this episode, Mike, I told you. I ran into him outside the media room when James and I were coming back from the media scrum with Will Venable and Chris Getz, because Mike is, and he's been saying this as well on MLB Radio. You can listen to him on Sirius XM. I highly recommend it. He's fantastic. He thinks that Garrett Crochet is totally getting traded during these winter meetings. And I told him, I have a feeling from the media scrum that the next White Sox move is actually adding someone. I was thinking more starting pitcher, but going back to the quotes and the media scrum from day 2 of the reactions, but the first time we get to chat with Chris Getz and Will Venable, James, I like the way that Getz was very transparent and honest when you asked him about right field, and that he made it clear that he was going to add, and he's done that. I also asked him about last year. You surprised us by signing Eric Fetty when we all thought you were going to trade Dylan Cease during the winter meetings in Nashville. So the White Sox may do things out of the order of operations we expect them to do, James, maybe in this winter meetings, where we expect them to trade Garrett Crochet. But instead of trading or unloading anyone in Dallas, is there a real possibility that other than Mike Tauchman, maybe the White Sox find another cheapish starting pitcher, that the White Sox add more during these winter meetings than subtract from what we heard today from Chris Getz?
Well, they're certainly leaning towards adding more since they've done that one move, and I feel like the sequencing of moves like rarely matters unless like it's setting up somebody to be flipped. The idea that they're going to need to, one, they just need more competent outfielders, or someone to bat lead off, or just needed to add to their outfield base, is not necessarily in sequence or coordinated with trading Garrett Crochet, which was always a market that's going to develop on its own pace. But yeah, I felt like, for one, I expected probably more of an answer of the way what he gave to Vinny's question about shortstop, of we'll look into anything we can do to improve the team, and that's a possibility, as opposed to very direct, which maybe should have been more of a tell that something was happening imminently for him to be like, yes, we are adding.
That's true. That is also how the reaction I got. That's a good example.
But yeah, it seemed a little more like this Crochet thing is something that they're going to have to wait out for the right moment, as opposed to these little smaller deals which can kind of come together at a more brisk pace. Like, I'm sure it didn't take 3 months or watching the entire market play out for Mike Tauchman's representations to say all right, here are your offers, what do you want to do? So yeah, I think I'd probably lean towards surprise if Crochet happened, because if it doesn't feel imminent tonight, there's really only one full day tomorrow, and then they're flying home on Wednesday. So yeah, I think so, but I also don't think it necessarily is some big tell on their larger intentions, or they're going to be super aggressive. It's just these smaller things, like signing Austin Slater, signing Mike Tauchman, they don't take that long. Whereas seeing other teams play out the market and try to figure out what they can sign free agents wise for starting pitching, or what they're willing to part with prospect wise, that's obviously something that's going to take a while. And the nature of where Getz is in the organization is that they should wait as long as they think they need to get what they want. That should at least include posturing like they're willing to go to spring training, and leaning on the what they did with Cease last year as an example to teams, hey, we're not gonna abide by any arbitrary deadline. So yeah, I think that could easily be something that takes a little bit longer, even if it's everything is this is the time to trade Crochet. This time is a 3 or 4 month window.
If you're like me, you're looking for an edge for sports betting. So when I heard Masterclass had a new class on beating the odds, taught by the pros who have made millions, I had to check it out. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. Novice bettors are at a huge disadvantage, with most losing early and fast. Before, the knowledge needed to level up was hard to come by. Now there's Masterclass, and the classes really make a difference. 88% of members feel that Masterclass has made a positive impact on their lives. I use it, and you should too. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. And Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/Blue Wire for their current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/Blue Wire. That's masterclass.com/Blue Wire. And remember, all sports betting involves risk, and you're responsible for complying with all sports betting laws in your jurisdiction.
This episode is brought to you by Disney Plus. Game on, because ESPN Plus content is available on Disney Plus. You can watch your favorites from Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus together like never before. With ESPN Plus, unwrap a full day of NBA action on Christmas Day. Tip off the festivities with the Spurs and Knicks, followed by the Mavs and Timberwolves. Then a clash between the Lakers and Warriors, followed by the 76ers and Celtics. And finally, the Nuggets face off against the Suns, all streaming December 25th. Then with Hulu, watch the terrifying sci-fi thriller Alien Romulus, where a group of young space colonizers come face to face with the ultimate horror. And on Disney Plus, follow the adventures of 4 kids across the galaxy as they meet unlikely allies and enemies in Star Wars Skeleton Crew, starring Jude Law. All of these and more now streaming and available with a bundle subscription. Visit disneyplus.com for details. Terms apply.
So we've learned that the next time Chris Getz says, we're definitely adding a position, you can say, so what did you do? What happened?
What did you do?
Yeah, that is the lesson learned. It was funny because I think Bruce Levine at 670 The Score asked him that question, James, about does being transparent and being honest with these press conferences and being out in the media, does that help you as a GM? And Getz thought it would, or make it very clear what his intentions are when teams are calling him. And as you guys heard earlier in the show, that his phone has been buzzing more since Juan Soto signed. The order operations thing is interesting because we always think of it as A to B to C. I think that is kind of influenced when we do our offseason plan projects. The recent example that came to light was the New York Yankees, poor Brian Cashman. All this news coming out, and Yankees fans are obviously taking it well that Juan Soto signed with the New York Mets. But it was reported from one of the New York publications that when Brian Cashman met with Scott Boras to talk about Blake Snell, Scott Boras told him, I need you to make an offer because Snell's got serious offers. And of course, that ended up being the Dodgers. And Cashman told Boras, well, I can't make you an offer because I could really only afford either or Snell or Juan Soto. So like the whole order of operations for Cashman, he needed a resolution with Soto before he can go to his backup plans. That's because of a huge amount of money that was committed to Soto. But the White Sox obviously don't have that problem. It is just kind of comical in baseball and how sometimes it is order of operations, but in this situation for the White Sox, it is not. They can wait, and it sounds like, Jim, that we are playing deja vu or reliving the whole Dylan Cease situation again, where I do have this feeling like, yeah, Chris Getz is comfortable waiting into spring training, if necessary, to trade Garrett Crochet.
Or it could be the order of operations, and like Mike Tauchman needed to sign for $1.5 million, or else he had to, or whatever he ends up signing for, or else the White Sox had to take that money elsewhere because they could only commit, $2 million at a time here. That is within the realm of possibility, but I don't think the time pressure is as, or I think there might be more urgency for teams to acquire Crochet than there was for Cease, because the entire market was slow for Cease last year. Like, there were not free agents coming off the board at the winter meetings. The Eric Fetty deal was like the biggest news of the meetings, and we were the lucky beneficiaries of being able to talk about it, have something to go home with and say, hey, at least we got a signing to talk about. And we didn't know how well it would turn out, but at least we had something to go with, and a little bit of mystery given the whole KBO background and not having seen him stateside with his new pitch mix. So we got something, but I think with the pace of players coming off the boards, the signings happening, I think just naturally the musical chairs will wrap up quicker to where it makes sense for a team to either sign a Max Fried or a Corbin Burnes, or say, like, I'm not interested in the 15, 20, 25, $30 million a year pitcher, Garrett Crochet at $3 million or whatever he's going to make in arbitration. That's a whole lot better, and we have a prospect we can give up and not feel like we're really sacrificing any kind of picture in order to add Crochet. I think it'll unfold quicker. And could wrap up tomorrow. I don't know. Like, we saw that, Yankees and Mets were reportedly interested, and those teams just popped up. It only takes a little bit of time, I think, for a critical mass of teams to, one up another till the price becomes, or the cost becomes, like, sufficient to Getz's interest. So possible. Like, I don't entirely disagree with Mike, because, like, Crochet is scarce. There's only one of them making the amount of money he's making. So all it takes is one say, like, yeah, we're done. Like, I give, or we've exhausted our external possibilities. Here's, fingers crossed, Roman Anthony. Probably won't happen, but that's like a good example of just like a price Getz would definitely do, I think. That's all it takes. So I think, like, the market coming together could happen more quickly just because of external, and also just the fact that there isn't a comparable pitcher to Crochet at his price.
Mike, I want you to ignore what Jim said. I was right. I'm kidding. James, do you agree with that? Do you think it's more likely if Chris Getz has to wait until Max Fried either signs with the team or makes it known that he's not signing with certain teams, where his phone starts buzzing more with more serious offers? Because it's not like they're short of interest. There are many teams interested. Since we've been here, the Brewers, the Reds, the Red Sox, as Jim just mentioned, the Mets and Yankees have had conversations with Chris Getz about Garrett Crochet. That number of teams probably is larger than what we know publicly, but does a Max Fried need to get off the board before Garrett Crochet finds a new home?
It could be a catalyst. It could help. It may not even be him being off the board as much as, like, maybe eliminating some teams, or setting a price and teams kind of realize, weighing and thinking that they're going to go another direction. But Crochet, there's been getting offers on Crochet since, like, obviously last July. Like, they've been in active dialogues with teams for a long time, and there's been a lot of scenarios they've been talking through, even just in the past week, and a lot of 3-teamers being thrown around. So, like, it could be the thing that helps. It might be like a factor. I don't think it's necessarily determinative, where it's like it had until that domino falls. Like, we won't know. It might be a factor for an individual team, but I don't think, like, it's Crochet's market is just, like, silent right now because everyone's just, like, debating Fried or Burnes. It's definitely percolating in a way where, like, if Crochet gets traded in 5 minutes, like, yeah, we'd be surprised, but we wouldn't be like, this came out of left field. It wouldn't stun us as much as, like, I don't know, Corey Lee getting traded. Like, that would be a surprise. Like, we weren't talking about that.
Or Andrew Vaughn. Yeah. Andrew Benintendi, if he got dealt.
I mean, Benintendi is at least someone, like, we know that they would like to trade because for a salary standpoint. But I'm going on down the road of this hypothetical shocking trade. But I think it could be a factor. I don't think it's necessarily, like, determinative of what Crochet's timeline will be.
Right. Anything else from your perspective, James, that White Sox fans should be mindful of or thinking about from today's media scrum with Chris Getz or even Will Venable?
I mean, the coaching staff stuff was interesting because, like, you really got confirmation that, like, there is nobody that, like, Venable really brought. There's 2 new additions to the coaching staff, and he made it clear that he kind of really learned, like, he had heard of them, but, like, really learned about them during the process. There was nobody who was like, this is my guy. So Venable seems like a nice, agreeable guy. There's a lot of nice, agreeable guys on the White Sox coaching staff. I don't think he's precluded from developing a right-hand man or developing what he was, said to be with Bochy, of like this extension of him who could talk to players and extend his bandwidth while being very consistent message-wise. But it's clearly something that will need to develop. It can start now, but we'll need to develop over time because this is not. There's nobody from Texas he brought over. There's nobody who's like. There's no Mike Tozar equivalent, and maybe with the way that went, you see that as a positive. But like, there's nobody who like Grifol had this whole host, and Eddie Rodriguez as well, of guys he'd just been working with for decades. Guys who he said like, whenever I get a managing job, you're going to be part of it. Like that's not part of this equation. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing because Grifol's tenure didn't go well. But it's certainly, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is clearly a coaching staff of Chris Getz's design. Like, he kept all the guys he hired last year because he liked them. He fired the ones he wanted to get rid of in August. Like, he's like, why would I fire more people? I got the staff I want. So it's something to watch. I know with the White Sox, there's all the reasons to be cynical of it and think that, like, it's because they don't want to bid for money involved. It's because they're not letting this new guy who could be an innovator, have as much influence as maybe people wanted or expected. I've certainly had people in the game reach out to me being like, "Why isn't Venable getting to pick more of his staff?" But it's definitely something to watch. I don't know how it'll turn, but it was intriguing. Another thing I thought was interesting was, as I said, we did get the we'll do anything to improve the team. We'll look out for that type of answer from Getz on shortstop, but it certainly didn't sound like somebody very inclined to add a shortstop. And
no.
The first thing he said was like, well, we've got Colson, which makes it sound like either one, Colson has a legit shot for breaking camp and being the opening day shortstop, or two, Colson is going to get such a majority of the reps at shortstop that like we don't think it's a good use of our very limited resources to add somebody who's going to maybe be pushed out by May. We can slap together with Brooks Baldwin, Jacob Amaya, maybe even Lenny Sosa, probably not at short at least, and not really expend resources at that position for what we think is really stretching the limits of what you'd even call a placeholder if it's really just like Colson's plan 1A for playing the majority of the season there. So I thought that was at least somewhat telling.
No, I think those are good points. Standing behind you, taking video of that media scrum. I mean, he made it very clear. We need help in right field. He got it by signing Mike Tauchman. I asked about starting pitching. The White Sox will sign another starting pitcher. If we're just going based on tone of what Chris Getz said in this media scrum, the White Sox are signing another starting pitcher. Even if they haven't traded Garrett Crochet by spring training, the White Sox will sign another starting pitcher of the same ilk of like Chris Flexen, right, Jim? Because again, money is an issue. I suggested Colin Ray in my Black Friday post on SoxMachine.com, bargain shopping for free agents of who could possibly sign under $5 million. Like it's going to be around that realm. It's not going to be your Frankie Montazes or anything like that.
I think it'll be guys who help cross days off calendar. Because I think that'll be a pretty vital role. It's just like, let's get the season over with as quickly as possible. And that was the goal of last season, was to get over with as quickly as possible. And instead they set the major league record for losses. So I think it is in their interest to maybe raise the collective ceiling. And maybe that's where, maybe one of the benefits, they lose Crochet, but like Jonathan Cannon being a little bit better than expected, especially for like his first full rookie year, like taking on more of a workload than maybe people thought he could have in 2024. Sean Burke, impressing probably as much as he could in a very limited amount of time. to where, like, maybe adding in innings eater along the lines of Flexen, somebody can throw 160 innings is like what they need just to protect like Kai Busch from being overextended like he was last year, or calling him Noah Schultz before they have to, like just somebody who prevents like the bad ideas, like basically like a dividing line between these guys are good and these guys might not be ready yet, and let's have a little bit of a firewall to prevent us from having to dip into the arms that were really pressing. Like Mason Adams would be another one. Like probably needs to see some time in AAA to make sure his stuff works against advanced hitters. But in May, June, maybe he'll be ready. Opening day, probably a bad idea. So one more pitcher, I think, that can at least step in and prevent bad ideas from being necessary at the onset is probably a good idea.
Yeah, because if you're lucky in today's baseball, if you got 4 guys that can make 20-plus starts, which takes care of half of your season, that's good, at least from a workload perspective. There's obviously what kind of results that they're getting for those starts and how many innings that they're eating. But if you just look at the White Sox roster right now, the 40-man roster, even their prospects, listeners, like more than 10 guys are going to be making starts for the 2025 Chicago White Sox. Like, sit down, pen and paper, write down who do you think could be making starts for the White Sox. It could be more than a dozen for this upcoming season.
It's not all bad either. I mean, like, there's room for Schultz to impress, for like somebody like Adams to sneak in there, somebody like Hagen Smith if he proves like he's just if he just proves that like minor leagues are a waste of his time, if he's that good, like he makes starts the second half of the season. So this is one case where the number of starters isn't necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. It's a bad thing for like a contending team if you have to go to I guess like the Tigers would be an example of like, they were supremely fortunate with how their starter shuffle and supreme opening and bullpen games worked out, but most teams would rather have that be confined to single digits, the number of starters having to take a turn. But in this case, there's lots of room for an audition, and I think there are lots of players who are worthy of a month's run, if not longer. And so I think that's one case where you just need at least a couple one or two arms, especially when Crochet is traded, to where, you're not needing Drew Thorpe out of the gate if he has any kind of setback with his rehab, and that if he's not ready, that just throws the entire plan for 2 other prospects into shambles.
It does.
When Crochet leaves, they will not have a starter on the roster that any contender would let start a playoff game, but but luckily they don't have to worry about that. They're very heavy, or at least not poor, in guys who it's worthwhile to see them pitch in the majors next year, which is good because that's really what they can offer. There are major league games to be played. It'd be nice if we had somebody worth seeing try to do that. I think I joke with you often when we talk about free agents of saying, no, that guy's too good. Which is a short and dirty way of saying, like, I don't think it's going to be somebody whose, like, performance last year was superficially good and thus is spiking their value. It's going to be somebody whose numbers are depressing their value in some way where they feel like they can perform some level of arbitrage by bringing them in, having them perform better and thus increasing their value. And even, like, Chris Flexen wasn't tradable necessarily for much at the deadline, but like he performed better than his previous numbers. They were right that he was not a 7 ERA guy. So I think something of that level, the Paul DeYoung level, which probably is much up there as far as like most successful major league moves that Getz made last year. This is something for them to like basically look for free agents again, which makes me a little surprised. I mean, obviously age, maybe declining defense, but Mike Tauchman's probably a bit higher than I would have thought. I would have thought, like, what's a left-handed version of someone who had Austin Slater's season last year? But I think, it's probably someone with a more credible recent track record than I generally expect them to add in free agency going forward.
Yeah, you shot down my Austin Hayes idea. Hayes too.
I think Chris did it by signing Mike Tauchman.
He sure did. He sure did, you jerks. We'll see if Colin Ray is a White Sox possibility. Maybe the White Sox bring back Chris Flexen. We'll see. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Again, there's a lot from Will Venable and Chris Getz in this episode. And, of course, as we get set up, the White Sox break some news. So I have this wonderful, fun task of trying to edit this podcast before more breaking news happens from the Chicago White Sox, but when it does, we'll have it covered on SoxMachine.com. You can follow us on social media. We're on all the social media platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan, as he'll be the one getting the news for us over at SoxMachine.com. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. We'll upload more videos from the winter meetings that we have been recording onto our YouTube channel shortly. All things take some time, so please be patient with us on that front. So thank you as always. And again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoy our work and you want full access to our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, and let's be honest, Major League Baseball, during these winter meetings, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Monthly plans start at just $5. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margalus and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.